We are going to be talking about business storytelling. It's a very exciting topic, right? However, when you talk about business storytelling, it turns out that people look at it differently. It means different things to different people, right? Some people think it's about talking about your company. You know, who is your company and why are you in business? And other people think it's about talking about your customers. Maybe it's talking about your products, right? People are using it in all kinds of different ways, right? So what I want to do is, and not everybody agrees on, you know, what does business storytelling mean? So I thought I would just start by telling you what our interpretation of business storytelling is, right? We think it's using storytelling techniques to accomplish business objectives, right? So we want to make sure that we marry those two together, right? When you're doing business storytelling, you just don't want to come up with a good story. You want to come up with a good story that does something for your business. Improves your image, increases your revenue, decreases your cost, improves your customer's experience, you know, something. Right? So we think it's about tying it to a business objective. Right? And this will make more sense as we go along. Right? So there is some disagreement and some confusion about the subject, and that's one of the reasons why we're here, is because we went through this process. We looked into business storytelling and how it could improve our business. Right? So the reason we're here is we want to share our experiences with you, because we were kind of surprised by some of the things we ran into. Right? It's easier said than done. Sorry about the pun, right? But it's easy to talk about. It's easy to understand what business storytelling is. But it's much harder to do, right? And so that's why we're here. We want to share our experiences with you because we think they'll be helpful, right? So regardless of what your interpretation of business storytelling is, right, I think that everybody involved in it can agree that it's getting a lot of attention, right? Some people think it's just a fad, like we're going through a storytelling fad and then we'll go into something else later. Some people believe it's here to stay, right? Some people believe it's the most effective way to communicate to your customers or to anybody that's in your audience, right? And then some people believe there's no place for storytelling in business. Business is very serious, right? And if somebody's going to talk to you about something and they say, well, let me tell you a story first, that can get a little old, right? So you want to use your stories, you know, when they're appropriate. But business storytelling is getting a lot of attention. And like I said, we've gone through it ourselves, and we want to share with you some of the experiences that we've had, some of the things that we've learned. Now, we certainly can't tell you everything we've learned in 45 minutes, and we can't turn you into business storytellers in 45 minutes, right? But we can help you integrate storytelling into your business. So I'm not sure where everybody is right now with business storytelling. Some of you may be doing it already. Some of you may be thinking about it. Some of you may just be here for more information. Right? So let me just do a quick poll so I know who's in the audience, right? So how many people are currently doing some form of business storytelling? How many people are thinking about it? Right? And then if you didn't raise your hand in either one of those two, you're probably here for more information. Right? So I think we can help all three groups, right? So if you're doing business storytelling already, then you know, the best way to learn business storytelling is to do it. The next best way is to watch somebody else do it, right? It is really an art form, and you can learn things from other presenters, right? You'll notice that in my presentation, I don't really have a lot of slides, right? My feeling is that if I show a slide, all of a sudden you're going to go back and forth between the slide and what I'm saying, right? So if I talk to you, then I have your attention. Right? So I'm only going to use slides when I really need to use them. Okay? So here's some of the things we want to share with you. Right? 3 things, actually, is what I want to share with you. We've got more we can talk about. We can schedule future conferences to keep the conversation going. But the 3 things that I want to share with you, the first one is that business storytelling works. Right? This is really important for those that are thinking about getting started or just want more information. It works. Right? I don't know if we could say exactly why it works, but we have our own ideas. Like for instance, we think it has to do with attention span. Right? I don't know if you guys know what the average attention span is, but it's around 15 or 20 minutes at best. That's when somebody's trying to pay attention. Right? So if you have something that goes beyond 15 minutes and you're talking to a group of people, right? You're going to start losing your audience, right? If you go another 15 minutes, your best friend can be in the audience, and you'll see their eyes start getting really tired, right? This has happened to me, and it's nothing to do with the people that are in the audience, right? It's our attention span, right? It's 15 or 20 minutes, and we just start atrophying. If we go 45 minutes without a break, we need a break, right? I like to think it's like if you're going to go jump in the water and hold your breath, right? You can hold your breath for so long, then you got to come up, right? And you can't go right back down. You need to, get your act back together. Then you can go back down. And the same thing with business presentations. If it's a long presentation, you're just going to start losing people if you don't do something different, right? I've been in discussions where we thought about maybe let's hand out candy bars to our audience. That'll keep them alive and awake. They'll all want a Snickers, But that's not really what we think the solution is. That does help, to get people to stretch and, change what they're doing so that they can keep going, right? But what bothers us is that we can watch a movie for 2 or 3 hours, or we can binge watch an HBO series all weekend, right? So it's like, how is the attention span 15 or 20 minutes, but we can do that? So that's when it occurred to us many years ago that they're doing something different in the movies and in stories that we're not doing in business, right? They're using drama, right? And it's drama, you can look at it as like the energy, right? So in a movie, it might start off with just, no drama, the ordinary world, so to speak, right? And then you get a call to adventure, right? And this is what engages the mind, right? The call to adventure, but it can't go on forever, so then something else happens and the energy goes down. Right? So in storytelling, the energy goes up and down, and that's what allows the mind to breathe underwater, so to speak. We can stay underwater longer if we have a way that we can breathe underwater. And the same thing when you're listening to a presentation, if we don't change the dynamics, then you're just going to atrophy. Your attention's going to atrophy, right? So that's why we can watch a movie for 2 or 3 hours, or watch a series for 2 or 3 days. We're excited about it. The only reason we quit watching the series is because we're exhausted physically. But we know we want to watch the next one, right? So there's something about this storytelling approach that's really meaningful in business. Now, if all of your talks are under 10 or 15 minutes, you probably don't need anything like this. But most business conversations do go much longer than that. Right? So that's what we're suggesting. The reason why storytelling works is because the dynamics go up and down and we can stick with it. Whereas in typical business presentations, we use the formula that says, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Right? We've eliminated all elements of surprise. If somebody told you a story like that, you'd be mad at them. Right? There's something to be said for not knowing what we're going to say next. Okay? The other reason we think it works is because we love stories. We love that pattern. We love to hear stories about how the hero or the protagonist overcame some kind of challenge. Right? There are other stories where the protagonist doesn't win. Those are okay stories. But we really like the ones where the hero goes all the way through and wins, or the group of heroes goes all the way through and wins. Right? And then the final thing about why storytelling works is we are storytellers. Right? If I approached you in the hallway and said, hey, how was your vacation? Right? You wouldn't show me an agenda of things that you're going to tell me, and even say a little something about them, and then tell me what you just told me. You would start at the beginning of your vacation, and you'd go all the way to the end, and you would talk about all the challenges you ran into. And you'd do it very naturally. And then it's time to present, and you go up there and you're going to tell them what you're going to tell them, and you tell them what you told them, and you're probably going to stand up here and you're going to read your slides to your audience. Right? But we are natural storytellers. But we have this habit of doing presentations a certain way. And when it comes to business storytelling, there's always a shadow character, right? And the shadow character for business storytelling is your old habits, right? Who has time to learn this new skill, right? Because that's the other thing we learned. So the first thing we learned is that it works. The second thing we learned is that it's a lot easier to talk about business storytelling than it is to actually do it. It's a journey in itself. Right? For a business to embrace business storytelling is a journey in itself, full of challenges along the way. Right? And that's what we went through. Right? And so, there's all kinds of things that you need to decide, like what kind of story are you going to tell? You're going to tell a story about your company? It makes a lot of sense to do that nowadays. Why are you in business? Who are you? What are your principles? Why should somebody want to do business with you? Right? So that might be one of the stories you want to talk about. It might be employee stories. You might want to build a culture with storytelling. Talk about employees of the past, situations that they've run into, and how they've dealt with those challenges, and maybe that'll give people the courage to persevere, right? And then, we see them. You can see them in commercials, right? You can see like Geico. I think that Geico just tells a silly story. It has nothing to do with insurance, because we remember stories. They tell their silly story, and then they say, oh yeah, in 15 minutes you can save up to 15%, right? And their story could be completely unrelated, right? Then you got Flo from Progressive. She's doing her own commercials now. She's every actor. It's at her house. Right? I don't know if you've seen those, but we're seeing a lot of, we're seeing just a lot of storytelling going on, right? And like I said, it works. We are storytellers. It is confusing. We're here to help you out with the confusing part. We'll go into the details about that, right? And then the last thing that I want to cover, let me just look at my notes real quick. Okay, so the third thing, this is probably the most important thing, right? So yes, you can use storytelling in all these different ways, but the most important thing that we've learned, right, is everything changes when you make the customer the hero of the story, right? When you make the customer the hero of the story, right, all of a sudden you get an opportunity to glimpse at what your product or solution or service looks like from your customer's perspective. Right? All the other stories that you can tell, they're your perspective, right? But when you make the customer the hero of the story, in a way, you get to look at your solution from their point of view. So that means your message is going to be a little clearer, right? It's also going to be a little more compelling because it's going to make sense, right? They're going to understand. We don't realize this, but we tend to talk about what we're talking about from our own perspective. It reminds me, I used to work for HP, and I started in the sales office in Chicago, right? And I was sure at that point in time that the product division here in Boise, Idaho, did not know what was going on in the market, right? Because I was in the market, and they were sending me information, sales information and product information, and it was clear to me that they didn't know what was really going on in the market. So I thought, I'll come to Boise, Idaho, I'll join the division, and I'll explain it to them, right? Well, it didn't take me very long to figure out that the field did not know what they were talking about, right? So it's a matter of how you're looking at the situation. If you're building the products, you're looking at it from this point of view. If you're buying the products, you're looking at it from this point of view, right? And the words mean different things, right? Most disagreements are actually semantical in nature. So what we're suggesting is if you use the customer's perspective, you can reduce these kinds of problems, right? You've probably all been in situations where you've had discussions with people and you finally decided to discuss what the words mean. I used to be in the printer working group, which is a standards group that creates standards for printers. And we used to argue until we defined the terms. We'd say, okay, when we say this is what we're talking about. And when you say that, that's what you're talking about. So we had to, the only way we could get through our discussions is if we were speaking the same language. And this is really the fundamental problem with our business presentations, is we're not speaking the customer's language, we're speaking our language. We're trying to get them to see it our way, right? And what I'm suggesting is everything changes when you try to see it your customer's way, right? It's not about you trying to change their minds. It's about you trying to understand their minds. It's a big difference. You become somebody who helps customers instead of hunts them. Okay? So that's what we're talking about. And what it really comes down to is when you use the customer's perspective, you're creating audience-centric content. And that basically means that this content is going to be easier for your audience to understand. And my question is if you can create something that's easier for your audience to understand, why wouldn't you? Right? Especially today when we're in this over-communicated society where people are sending messages all the time, and when you finally have the customer's attention, why not make it easier for them to understand what you're trying to say? Right? Show them how your product or solution actually helps their situation. Right? So that's our proposition. Everything changes when you make the customer the hero. So what I'd like to do is show you how we do this. Right? Because it's really important. So let me start by saying that when you make the customer the hero, your role changes. Right? If the customer's the hero, then who are you? You're the mentor. Right? In story language, you're the mentor. If you're talking about your company, then your company's the hero. If you're talking about the customer situation or the customer's journey or the customer's narrative, they're the hero, you're the mentor. It's really important to realize that you're the mentor. Why should they listen to you? It's important to understand why they should listen to you, right? I think you should listen to me because if you're interested in business storytelling, we have decades of experience with it. We ran into pitfalls and challenges that we think that we can prevent you from running into or better handling, right? And one of our suggestions is make the customer the hero. You can make anybody the hero, you can make anything the hero, but when you make the customer the hero, everything changes, your role changes into the mentor, and you really have to answer the question, why should they listen to what I have to say? Now, you're also framing this story, so this is an opportunity to put yourself into the position of authority. Now, when I prepared this talk, I didn't know who was going to be in the audience. I didn't know who is doing business storytelling. There could be a business storytelling expert, right? I really didn't know, but what I thought was I'm just going to be useful, and I'm going to put myself into a position of authority. So I'm not saying I'm the authority on business storytelling. I'm saying I'm the authority on business storytelling the way that Intricon has implemented it. You see what I'm saying? Is, you know, if you don't put yourself in a position of authority, if you don't play the role of the mentor, then you're offering an opportunity for your whole audience to attack what you're saying, right? I don't think anybody here is going to challenge me on how Intricon has implemented business storytelling, right? So that's our suggestion. It changes your role. Put yourself into a position of authority so that you can proceed with your talk and not have to worry about, is anybody going to challenge making the customer the hero? I'm just telling you that's what we've learned. And it's made a big difference to us. It allows us, when we make the customer the hero, it allows us to customize our materials for our customer. We don't just have a general presentation. We have something that's really designed to make it easier for them to understand how this is done. So here's how we do it. Okay? We know that the customer is in a current situation right now. Right? We're going to call that point A. Okay? We also know that they want to be somewhere else. Right? Or it may be that we know that they could be somewhere else and we're going to suggest to them, we have a breakthrough technology, this is your current situation, you could be here. Or that's an opportunity, right, for the customer. Or it could be that they have an objective in mind, they want to do something. Right? So they know what their position A is, their point A is, and they know what their point B is. However you come up with point B, right, they ultimately have to want to get there. Right? So point A is the customer's current situation, and it must include the pains and the challenges that people are currently facing today. Right? Because if you want to be helpful to your customer, you have to know what the challenges are so that you can address them. Right? Now, when you paint your picture of point B, what their world looks like after they use your product or solution or service, right? The pains are gone. Right? So they have pain in point A, and the pains are gone in point B. And the story that we're going to craft is, how does the customer get from point A to point B? Right? Now, before we actually do this, I should make one more really, really important point. And it has to do with what I said our definition of storytelling is. We think business storytelling is about using storytelling to accomplish a business objective. Right? So before we actually start the customer story, you have to ask yourself, what do you want to accomplish? Right? If you don't know, then you don't know if you got there. Right? Remember, business storytelling is a journey in itself. And your situation may be that you're not doing it today, or that you are doing it today, or you're thinking about doing it today. That's your current situation. Right? Then, this point B is your future situation. Right? And what we have to do is we have to figure out how to fill in this gap from point A to point B. We need some kind of tool, right? And for storytelling, our recommendation, the tool that you should use, is the popular hero's journey. Has everybody heard of the hero's journey? Okay? You've probably seen it in action, right? Because ever since Star Wars, every movie that's come out has basically used that approach. Right? Now, the hero's journey is not the only story structure. There's other story structures. There's some with 3 steps. Like some people will say, to create a story, every story has 3 parts: a beginning, a middle, and an end. Right? Well, that's true. Okay? But we don't think that's enough. There's some that have 18 or 20 steps. Right? We think that's too much. Right? But the hero's journey is 12 steps that fits really nicely in the 3-act structure. Right? And in fact, I do have 1 or 2 slides, and let me just show you. Here's what we're talking about. This is the hero's journey. Okay? Now, you have to memorize it. You have to learn it. Right? So I'll show you, right? It starts off with the ordinary world, your heroes doing ordinary things. You've got some kind of call to adventure, right? Of which the hero usually refuses or has some kind of hesitation until they meet with a mentor that convinces them to set their doubts aside and cross the first threshold. There, they experience test enemies and allies and learn from each one of those challenges they overcome. They approach the inmost cave, right? They have the big ordeal. It's not the climax of the story, but it's a very important part of the story. If that's successful, we retrieve the reward, and then we're only halfway done with our story. We still have to return back to society to improve society. So we have the road back, which there's more challenges in the road back. Then there's the resurrection, which is really the climax of the story. And then you have the boon to society, or the return with the elixir. You have to memorize the structure. And your homework is to watch movies with a pad of paper and a pencil or a pen. Right? It makes the movie more interesting, first of all. Like I said, they all start off with this. You see the ordinary world, then you see the call to adventure. You can call it as you see it. You may make a few mistakes in the beginning, but you'll start to get a feel for this pattern. Now, the reason you need this pattern memorized is because typically in a presentation, we use our slides to tell us what to talk about next. Right? So normally, I would have bulleted slides there. And we convince ourselves that the bulleted slides are for you. Right? So that you can, right? But I also sit down and I listen to presentations, and as soon as a slide goes up, and I noticed it here, by the way, I was trying to talk to you, but you were looking at my slide. Right? So you see, business storytelling is about talking to your audience, not about reading a book or reading a PowerPoint presentation to your audience. Right? So I do have a slide because I want you to see the list. Right? Because basically the way that this works is like I said, it fits nicely into the 3-act structure. So, I have a little remote. Okay, so the way that it fits nicely into the 3-act structure is the first 4 of them, the ordinary world, the call to adventure, the refusal, and the meeting with the mentor. That's all Act 1. So that's the beginning. Right? So whenever you create a story, you've got to have a beginning. If you use the hero's journey, then the beginning means these things. What's the ordinary world? What are they being asked to do? What are their challenges? Etc. That's Act 1. And remember, the hero refuses the call, so there needs to be some kind of discussion with the mentor, right, to convince you to cross the first threshold. Right? And the first threshold begins Act 2. Sometimes this is called the ordinary world, the special world, and then the return home to the ordinary world. Okay? But here, the hero is going to run into crossing the first threshold, whatever that means in business. Right? And then we've got test enemies and allies, approaching the inmost cave, the big ordeal, and seizing the reward. That's the special world. We're halfway done with our story. Then the 3rd act is, like I said, the road back, the resurrection, and the return with the elixir. Okay? So this is how it works, but what we realized was that this can be quite challenging, right? Especially if you have to give a presentation, say, next week, and you're thinking, I should use that approach, right? It takes courage to do your first one, right? To let go of your slides and just talk to your audience. Remember, we're natural storytellers, right? Now, in our journey, this was the toughest part, right? Memorize. First of all, you got to find the time to memorize the structure. Because the reason you want to memorize the structure is you want to know where you're at in your presentation, just like you want to know where you're at in your story, right? So I know that I'm in test enemies and allies, and we're headed towards approaching the inmost cave. I don't know if you guys knew this. Do you feel like you're approaching the inmost cave? Right? But I know that's where we are. I know that's where we are because I know the structure. Right? So I don't need a slide to tell me this is what you need to talk about next. Right? What I can tell you about the hero's journey is it's quite challenging. It's easy to understand. It's easy to enjoy. We love the pattern. Right? But to actually take the time to memorize it and then apply it to business. Right? What is crossing the first threshold? What is the resurrection in business terms? It's the biggest challenge you'll have. It's almost like it's a chasm that you have to cross, right? You have to somehow internalize this process and make it meaningful for business, and not just any business, but your business, right? And so that's why we're here. We want to tell you about these things, but we also want to tell you that we know this is a huge issue for business storytellers, and we'd like to offer up a solution for it, okay? So this is the classic hero's journey. You could use this all by itself. You just Google the hero's journey. You'll find so much information about the hero's journey, it probably will overwhelm you, right? That is one of the challenges with storytelling, is that there's stuff just about storytelling and not about business, right? And so you've got to internalize this and then marry the two together. So that's what we've done, and we'd like to share that with you. Okay? So here's what we think the business storytelling process is. For Act 1, instead of the ordinary world, we're saying it's the situation or the background. It's the customer situation or background with their pains and gains. What is their world all about? This is all about learning about who your customers are, instead of them learning about your products or services, right? So what is their situation? And then what do they need to do, or what do they want to do? This is point B, right? Or this is the suggestion of point B. Point B is actually at the very end when they got there, right? But what is their situation? What are they being asked to do, or what do they want to do? And then what are their challenges or obstacles to doing that, right? Now, we see all the time that we talk about customers and their needs, but we really don't talk about their challenges. But when you make the customer the hero, their challenges is the most important thing. Because what you want to do in Act 1 is you want to offer up your value proposition. How do you help? right? And if you take a look at Act 1 here, what is their situation? What are they trying to do? What are their challenges? And how do you help with those challenges? If you don't have any challenges, you can't really offer any help. All right? So we call Act 1 delivering your value proposition. Right? If you've ever tried to create a value proposition, they're kind of difficult. What is the value that we're offering? Right? The value we're offering is we're suggesting that with our new layout, our new process, you can save yourselves a lot of time and trouble implementing business storyteller where the customer is the hero. Now, you can leverage what we've done, you can modify what we've done, right? But this is the big hurdle. How do you make it make sense for business? So Act 1 is delivering your value proposition in a way that is clear, because you know what the customer situation is, you know what they're trying to do, you know what their challenges are, and that lends itself very well to how do you help them with their challenges. Because this value proposition is the meeting with the mentor, and we're trying to convince them to drop their doubts and their uncertainties. And then listen to what your value proposition is, and if it's compelling, it'll convince them to take the next step, which is crossing the first threshold, of which there's no turning back. The journey has begun. Right? So that's Act 1. And then Act 2 is if you said that your value is that you're faster, or that you're easier to work with, or that you're a single vendor solution, or you're more cost effective, or you can improve the quality, or whatever your value proposition was, Act 2 is the special world. Act 2 is the special world where you have to back it up. If you said you were faster, where's your data? Right? Now this is data, tangible data hopefully. You know, data isn't always tangible, but if you can find tangible proof points that justify your value proposition, show the truth in your value proposition. If you said you were faster, do you have some data? Do you have a customer testimonial? Or 2 or 3? Do you have others saying, yes, this really works? Right? Because you can say anything you want. But what you're trying to do is convince people that you've got the right solution for them. So there has to be good reasoning behind your logic, right? And so this special world is the world of proof, right? Like for instance, supporting data, that's what I'm talking about. Do you have supporting data for your customer so that they can see that you've done this before? You don't have to overwhelm them with all the data you have, just prove your value proposition, right? And you don't have to talk about everything you offer. That's usually the biggest problem is you have like 100 slides in your deck. It's almost like a shotgun approach. It's like, let me tell you everything we do, and hopefully one of those things will be of interest to you. We're saying don't do that. Why don't you learn about your customers, see what they're trying to do, what their challenges are, and offer up some help with their challenges. That's your value proposition. Very clear, perhaps even compelling, all depending on what you're offering. All right? Then we go into the world of proof. Now, you don't just start showing your data, you may have to prepare your audience for your data. So crossing the first threshold is really preparing your audience, or maybe giving an overview before you get into the details. Maybe you used a particular sampling method, or you certain demographics, or whatever, whatever it is, but before you just go and present your data, set up the data so that they understand what it means, right? Now, you may not be the only one in that business, in that industry. Right? So there might be a competitive landscape where you have to talk about alternatives and why you're still the best choice, even though the customer does have alternatives. You're trying to prove that you can do what you said you could do in your value proposition, and you can do it better than anybody else. But most importantly, you draw concluding remarks about why you're the best choice to help the customer accomplish their goals. Right? If you had a value proposition, you got to prove that you can do it. If anybody else says they can do it, you got to prove why you're unique. And then you wrap up the whole thing by showing that what's really important is the customer's trying to get to point B. And you are better at helping you're better at helping the customer get to point B because you understand what their situation is and what their challenges are. Right? So you stay away from the spec war and the price war. Right? It's about who can help the customer the best. And it's usually the company that knows the customer the best. Right? So know your customer, and then you'll know how to help. And you'll know why you're different than your competitors. Because you're focused on the customer being the hero, getting all the way to point B. And that'll come through in your communications. And then you won't look like you're fighting with your brother or your sister when you're talking about the competitors. Okay? And then, after that, we're only halfway done because this is the equivalent of the reward. We still have to return home, right? This is a big deal in business, the agreement, but it's not a done deal. Because it's a done deal only after the solution has been implemented. Some solutions are harder to implement than others, right? It's usually this part of the story, the third act, is the real action, right? And in business, it's also the real action in the business narrative, right? You may have sold the customer, or the customer, I should say, agrees that this is the right solution for them, but all depending on the complexity, we have to have some next steps. And we also have to have some support for the customer. Now, the support element that's right here is really an indicator of how much you care, right? If you don't care, then you provide very little support. Because remember, our objective is to help the customer get from point A to point B, right? And if we just got through this big ordeal section here, and we're on next steps in support, we're not done until that customer is satisfied. So satisfied they want to go tell other people about how well this worked, right? I'm hoping that you guys do this. I'm hoping that you do business storytelling with this approach, leveraging our model, and that it's successful, and that you let me know, right? That's what I'm hoping. Okay, and the same thing, you know, when you're talking to your customers or your audiences, if you really want them to be successful, then you have to offer up some kind of support, right? And so the support that we're offering up is a book, right? It's available on Amazon, right? And it's an ebook and audiobook and paperback. It's inexpensive. And basically what it does is it takes the structure that I just showed you and it provides all the details, like how do you describe the ordinary world? And how do you describe the ordinary world? And how do you, see, we didn't even talk about characters. For stories, you need characters and a storyline, right? So the book also goes into the characters. In regular business storytelling, you have like the hero, the mentor, the shapeshifter, the trickster, the shadow. That doesn't make sense in business, right? But the customer, you as the mentor, solutions and allies and helpful aids, opposition, competition, those make more sense. So the book covers the characters and the storyline, right? But so this is our way of saying we want you to be successful doing this, right? Because we truly believe that if you create customer-centric or audience-centric materials, that it's going to be easier for them to understand what you're trying to say. And we think that you'll have more success getting through to your customers, understanding what their world's like and trying to fit your product or solution in there to offer help. And, you know, let me back up just a little bit. What you want to do is once you have this list, once you're working with this list, you look for areas where you can help. Like, for instance, the needs and opportunities. I said that could be that the business wants to do something and they need help, or they don't know that something's available. Okay? So your value could be that you're bringing attention or awareness to them that there's a new solution available that presents a new point B for them. Right? So that could be your value, is you're letting them know that there's a new thing in town. Right? It could be that you can help with the challenges and obstacles and convince them to cross the first threshold. Or maybe you can help them get started. Maybe you can help them justify their decisions with supporting data, or help better understand the competitive landscape, or maybe implement the project. Maybe you can do everything. Then your value proposition is you're a single vendor solution. right? Or maybe you can do some of these things, but whatever it is that you can do, you'll know. Because you're trying to help. You're trying to, for instance, we've gone through this process. We've embraced business storytelling, so we think we can help. We've learned some things, and that's what we're trying to share with you. And I believe that if you do these, that you'll also experience this, right? So you don't have to just take our word for it. We're encouraging you to do this, right? And we want you to succeed. So there's a few ways that you can get started. One of them, of course, is you could get the book and just read the instructions in the book. It's a guide, and it just steps you through the whole process. Another way is you can contact us, right? We can do it for you, we can help you do it, or we can show you how to do it yourself, all right? So, however you learn, though, like I said, we really want to know about your successes. You can tell us about your challenges that you've had with it too, and we'd be happy to talk to you about those things. But we believe that this way of communicating to your audience is here to stay. It makes a lot of sense. It puts a little more pressure on the presenter because we don't have slides guiding us along the way, but we have your attention when we're talking, right? And that's the most important thing. We think that you'll appreciate it as well. There's a number of ways to learn it. We are running out a little bit of time. I want to save a little bit of time for questions if you have any questions, right? But we also have a booth. I think we're at 308. Right? And here's also the contact information. So however you do it, if you have successes, please send me something, right? We'd like to hear about it. You could even say, we need the information, right? In fact, you could say, we need your help. And that would be your call to adventure. Thank you. Okay, so I do want to, just make sure if anybody has any questions about what I've said or needs any clarification or anything like that, I'd be happy to hang out for 5 or 10 minutes. Hopefully, what I've told you today is something that is really useful, because that was my intention, was to show you something that will help you with business storytelling. And does anybody have any questions at all? Talk to your audience. Right? If you can't do that, then watch other business presenters, business storytelling presenters. You can learn things. It's really an art form, and that's what happens in the world of art, is we learn from each other. Right? So if you've done business storytelling with bulleted slides, I just showed you how to do them without. And so maybe that's something you want to give a try. But it does take courage, right? And then once you experience the feedback, once you actually experience looking at the problem from your customer's point of view, it's really hard to go back to the other way, right? Now, once you get through your first one, then you're going to develop confidence, right? And when you develop confidence, then you're going to become a resource to others, right? So another good way to learn is to look at other people's presentations. This format that I just showed you is a great analytical tool for your existing presentations. Right? I can tell you right now, what's probably missing in your current presentations are the challenges and the shadow character. Right? Every time I see one and I go through it, they're always missing. Right? And remember, without the challenges, you don't know how you're going to help. And probably the most important thing is we love the pattern of stories told where the hero overcomes challenges. Right? So. And gets back safely, yeah. Yeah, sure, there some stories are tragic. Yeah. You want to create a narrative where the customer is successful getting from point A to point B, and they really needed your assistance to do it. Right? So anyway, that's what I have for you today. We can certainly talk more. My contact information is there. We also have a booth. But this does work. We are using it, and we can help others use it as well, and not go through all the trouble that we had to go through. So anyway, I think we've run out of time. We could talk more, but I have to let you go. Thank you very much.